Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We get to finish up with Romeo and Juliet today, which is sad but not. It's a sad ending to a play. And we get to finish it off hearing from Friar Lawrence in Act 5, Scene 3. So just a quick reminder of what has happened. Juliet is dead asleep in her family's tomb because she had taken a potion that Friar Lawrence gave her that's supposed to make her look like she's dead for like 42 hours, and then she's supposed to wake up in the tomb, and Romeo was supposed to be there to meet her, and they would run off to Mantua together. But the message didn't get to him that she was just faking being dead, so he came back from Mantua with a vial of poison that he had purchased for himself so that he could die next to Juliet. And when he arrived at the tomb, he found that Paris was there, and he and Paris fought. Romeo killed Paris, brought him in to lie next to Juliet per Paris's request as he was dying. And then yesterday we had Romeo saying a long, sad farewell to Juliet before he drinks the poison and dies next to her. So once he has died, Friar Lawrence arrives at the cell because he knows now that the letter didn't make it to Romeo, so he's trying to get to the mausoleum in time for Juliet to wake up so that she doesn't freak out at Romeo's absence once she wakes up. So he gets there and he finds Balthazar, who had gone with Romeo and was sort of standing guard, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And Balthazar's like, "I heard some weird noises in there and I couldn't bring myself to leave, but I wasn't supposed to go back in yet." So Friar Lawrence goes in and he finds dead Paris and dead Romeo, and he's like, "Oh crap, this is really bad." And then Juliet wakes up and she's like, "Hey, I am where I'm supposed to be, so where's Romeo?" And Friar Lawrence is like, I'm so sorry. But he tells Juliet that he can set her up in a nunnery somewhere far away so that she doesn't have to explain how she's alive again and all that sort of thing. He's like, I can take care of this. I'm sorry that Romeo has died, but come with me and we'll figure something out. And she, of course, is full of woe because that's what happens when you wake up in a mausoleum and find your husband dead. So she doesn't want to go with him. And then there's a noise outside that scares him, and he goes to take a look and see what it is. And while she is left alone, she discovers the vial of poison and she tries to drink it, but there's none left. She tries to kiss Romeo to get a little drop that's like still on his lips, but there isn't any. The noise happens outside again. She picks up a dagger and just stabs herself to be done with it. And the noise that was happening outside was like the rest of the town, the rest of Verona, because they're like, there's people running through the streets saying that Romeo is back or that Paris is dead. Some are saying Juliet's dead. Like, what's going on? So all these watchmen start converging. All these pages start converging. Eventually the prince shows up. And everybody just finds this scene and they're like, wait a second, wasn't she already dead? And now she's dead again? And Romeo and Paris are also both dead? Like, what is going on here? And then the Capulets show up and they are full of woe. And then Romeo's father shows up and says that Romeo's mother was so distraught over Romeo's banishment that she died overnight. And he now finds out that his son has also died. So he's all full of woe. And nobody really knows what happened or what's going on. So finally they get Friar Lawrence back in the picture, and he's like, yeah, I'm really the only one that can maybe shed any sort of light on this. And Prince Aeschylus is like, yes, please do that. And Friar Lawrence says, I will be brief, for my short date of breath is not so long as is a tedious tale. Romeo, there dead, was husband to that Juliet. And she, there dead, that's Romeo's faithful wife. I married them, and their stolen marriage day was Tybalt's doomsday, whose untimely death banished the new-made bridegroom from this city, for whom, and not for Tybalt, Juliet pined. You, to remove that siege of grief from her, betrothed and would have married her perforce to County Paris. Then comes she to me, and with wild looks, bid me devise some means to rid her from this second marriage, or in my cell there would she kill herself. Then I gave her, so tutored by my art, a sleeping potion, which so took effect as I intended, for it wrought on her the form of death. Meantime, I writ to Romeo that he should hither come, as this dire night to help to take her from her borrowed grave, being the time the potion's force should cease. But he which bore my letter, Friar John, was stayed by accident, and yesternight returned my letter back. Then, all alone, at the prefixed hour of her waking, came I to take her from her kindred's vault, meaning to keep her closely at my cell till I conveniently could send to Romeo. But when I came, some minute ere the time of her waking, here untimely lay the noble Paris, and true Romeo dead. She wakes, and I entreated her come forth and bear this work of heaven with patience. But then a noise did scare me from the tomb, and she, too desperate, would not go with me, but as it seems, did violence on herself. All this I know, and to the marriage her nurse is privy, and if aught in this miscarried by my fault, let my old life be sacrificed some hour before the time unto the rigor of severest law. So he's recounting the story that we all know already, but only from his perspective. He doesn't necessarily know that Romeo took a poison that he had purchased from an apothecary in order to kill himself, that sort of a thing. He's recounting everything as he knows it, and the nurse then is able to say that yes, they had gotten married, and Romeo had given a letter to Balthazar to give to his father after he had died, so that verifies some of the other parts of Friar Lawrence's tale, so it can all be corroborated and shown to be true. And Prince Aeschylus is understandably really, really angry about this whole situation, but Lord Capulet and Lord Montague make peace with each other and say that they are going to make golden statues of their children to stand as monuments to how the two houses need to come together and stop fighting. And Prince Aeschylus is like, okay, I guess that's cool, but because people should learn from this, because it was a very, very sad story. And that's the end of Romeo and Juliet. So yeah, it's taught in schools often, and it is often held up as being this beautiful love story, which I think is, at least from my perspective, is the least important theme that you can pull from this, because the actual love story between Romeo and Juliet, like, they knew each other for 2 days in total or something like that. And maybe we all like to fantasize about meeting that person that you fall in love with and you get married to instantly, whatever, but they didn't really talk about much before they got married, and they sort of jumped into it, and she was sort of a rebound girl for him because he had been so in love with Rosalind at the beginning. So it's a story about the fickleness of male love, male heterosexual love, and it's a story about the dangers of holding grudges too long and the dangers of what we teach our children in terms of holding grudges, which is important in this day and age. Be careful what you're teaching your children. Don't teach them to hate, because stuff like this can come from that. Because if you remember earlier in the play, like at the party and everything like that, Lord Capulet didn't really care that Romeo had crashed the party. It was the younger generation, it was Tybalt, that got really upset about it. So yeah, the dangers of holding on to grudges and old feuds that have already run their course and aren't serving anybody anymore. And also the dangers of making really rash decisions in life. There's several times in the play where it is mentioned that all of this is happening very quickly, and it's maybe not the smartest things to do, but they do the things anyway. Like Juliet, when she first meets Romeo, and the whole quote-unquote balcony scene, and she's like, this is too quick, this is too sudden, all that sort of a thing. And even when Romeo goes to buy the poison from the apothecary, he remarks on how this is a rash decision that he is making that is maybe not the wisest choice, but he can't make himself make any other choice in that particular situation. So it's a story about the dangers of being stupid and holding on to grudges too long. And it's also in fairness to like writing style, I think a lot of schools and things like that like it because it is sort of linear. And if you're going to put on a high school production of a Shakespeare play, you really only have to worry about having a handful of good actors who know what they're doing, as opposed to something like Midsummer Night's Dream, where you have the mechanicals and you have the lovers and you have the royals and you have the fairies, like all these different groups with all these different stories that come together at the end. Romeo and Juliet is a very linear story that follows two people and their interactions with the few people around them. So it's probably simpler to teach and simpler to follow along with than some of Shakespeare's other plays, but I love the complexity of so many of Shakespeare's other plays, so this one to me is a little bit of a downer. And also the fact that the first half is a comedy and the second half is a tragedy. That just by nature to end as a tragedy makes it a bit of a downer. So yeah. Those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts on Romeo and Juliet. If you love the play and I ruined it for you, I'm sorry. I feel like the play is worth looking at from lots of different angles, and instead of just holding it up as this beautiful romance, we should recognize it for what it is. It's a play about the dangers of holding grudges and being stupid. So, with that said, tomorrow we move on to the Comedy of Errors, which is very much a comedy. There's mistaken identities and hilarity ensues and all of that fun stuff. So a little bit of a palate cleanser as we get into the year of the plays, which starts tomorrow. So come on back for new play day, starting into the year of the thes, and I will see you then for that. Mwah.